Chapter 113. Spirit Fruit Ripening. Even Uncle Ma on the side couldn't help but think about it, and wondered if he should go back and talk to the family head about this matter. Uncle Ma, Yun Hongmai on the side, was right next to Uncle Ma. Seeing Uncle Ma's expression, how could she not know what he was thinking? At that moment, she stomped her foot on Uncle Ma's foot and glared at him with her small mouth. "Oh, the weather is so nice." Uncle Ma's old face reddened, dryly laughed and looked up at the sky. Yun Hongmai immediately blushed in shame and hid behind her sister, Yun Shuiyao. Only her two big eyes were still secretly looking at the distant sky. Yun Shuiru's expression was thoughtful. A hint of a smile surfaced on her reddish little face, and her back as she looked towards Kang Chon was even filled with an inexplicable bright light. On the other side, after Kang Chon heard Shen Tupeng's words, he slowly put away his long black blade and looked at him coldly. If it wasn't for Shen Tuji's face, he would have already died from that slash just now. This was not arrogance on his part. If he really wanted to kill Shen Tupeng, there was no way that Shen Tupeng could have arrived here in time just now. After all, Kang Chon could have completely executed the heaven-escaping hand, or Xiao Jin could have stopped Shen Tupeng. Kang Chon was only doing this to give Shen Tupeng a lesson, and incidentally deter the surrounding crowd, thus facilitating the competition for the water spirit fruit later on. Many thanks. Shen Tupeng clasped his fists at the words. He naturally knew what Kang Chon meant. The other party did have the strength to say this. Shen Tupeng, who was hiding behind Shen Tupeng's face, was incomparably ugly. Kang Chon's words made him ashamed and humiliated to the extreme. If eyes could kill Kang Chon, then Kang Chon would have died countless times by now. Regarding Shen Tupeng's cynicism, Kang Chon mockingly shook his head. This kind of person wasn't worth his concern, because the other party didn't have this kind of strength and qualification. Moreover, it was thought that the Shen Tu family wouldn't make a deadly feud with him for a playboy. Thus, Kang Chon coldly scanned the surrounding crowd and prepared to revert back to the Yun family group. But right at this moment, Shen Tupeng's voice suddenly came out. "Overlord, wait. What is it?" Kang Chon stopped his steps and turned back to look at him with a frown. Shen Tupeng clasped his fists and said, "Just now, Fenga was in the wrong. In order to express my Shen Tu family's apology, the old man has decided to make every effort to help Hegemon obtain the water spirit fruit this time. And I hope that Hegemon won't hold a grudge against the Shen Tu family because of the unpleasantness just now." Boom. The moment Shen Tupeng said this, everyone present was in an uproar, followed by a noisy murmur. If Shen Tupeng really did this, then who else would be able to compete with Kang Chon this time? After all, the strength of the Shen Tu family was originally the most powerful present, and now with the addition of the Yun family and Kang Chon, I'm afraid that all of the people present may not be able to fight against it. In this case, this water spirit fruit can only be obtained by Kang Chon. Although the crowd in the field fear Kang Chon, but does not mean they give up the fight for the water spirit fruit. After all, the scene is chaotic, who all have to play the autumn breeze of the mind. Besides, even if Kang Chon was very powerful, it was impossible for him to fight one against 10,000 and make enemies of everyone present. But with the help of the Shen Tu family and the Yun family, then Kang Chon would have that backbone. The crowd could not help but look towards the distant Zhou family's men as well as the Zhong family's men with anticipation. They hoped that these two forces would come forward and speak up, or else the water spirit fruit would all be obtained by Kang Chon this time. However, to their great disappointment, the Zhong family's people were unmoved and only looked over with astonished faces. However, the Zhou family's men moved, and the two of them, Zhou Yunji and Zhou Chanshu, walked towards Kang Chon's side. At once, hope could not help but rise in the hearts of the crowd. As long as someone led the way and gathered everyone present, there was still a chance to compete with Kang Chon's side. While the Zhou family duo marched in, Kang Chon looked at Shen Tupeng in front of him with a surprised expression and frowned. "What do you mean by this?" He wouldn't think that Shentapeng was just trying to express his apologies. "I am just hoping that the Shenta family can make a friend with the Overlord," Shentapeng said with a smile. Kang Chon stared at him in a daze. His icy eyes seemed to want to see through to the heart. But Shentapeng's face was so sincere that Kang Chon could do nothing about it, and he had no choice but to nod his head indifferently. At this time, the duo from the Zhou family had already walked over, and they clasped their fists at Kang Chon and Shentapeng. Senior Shentu, Overlord, Zhou Yunji clasped his fists, and Zhou Chanchu on the side did the same. Kang Chon was not familiar with them and nodded coldly. Shentapeng, on the other hand, sneered coldly. "What's wrong? The old man has decided to assist the Overlord. Do you guys have any comments?" He respected Kang Chon, but it didn't mean that he cared about the Zhou family as well. To be honest, with the strength of their Shenta family, the Zhou family wasn't in their sights yet, after all. The prestige of the Demon Yuan City's #1 family wasn't a falsehood. "Naturally, there are opinions," Zhou Yunji said with a smile. Shentapeng's face instantly sank, but Kang Chon on the side was indifferent. He didn't think that once his kingly aura was released, others would automatically submit. He wasn't that narcissistic yet. When the people in the distance heard this, they were secretly surprised one by one, thinking that the Zhou family really did have the courage to offend the Shenta family and the Overlord to their faces. Just as they were happy, Zhou Yunji's next sentence was what made them almost fall over. Zhou Yunji continued to laugh. "The name of the Overlord, my little brother has admired for a long time. This time it is rare to see the Overlord's real body. Our Zhou family is willing to unconditionally assist the Overlord in obtaining this water spirit fruit. Rely on." The crowd in the distance was first stunned, and then they all despised in their hearts. They thought that the Zhou family had a bottom line, but they didn't think that they were still wallflowers. "This is good." Kang Chon behind the Cloud family, Shenta Ji, Zhou family. "I'm afraid that the remaining one Zhong family would not dare to offend the three families and the hegemony at the same time." Shentapeng was stunned at his words. Then he looked deeply at Zhou Yunji. A trace of appreciation flashed in his eyes as he said, "For the Zhou family to have such an outstanding son like you, it's no wonder that it can rise so quickly. Many thanks for the praise, senior." Zhou Yunji gave an undeniable smile, without pride or modesty. Zhou Chanchu beside him secretly nodded his head. With this son in the Zhou family, the rise was inevitable. Kang Chon gazed at Zhou Yunji for a moment and nodded faintly. He was a little strange at first, but immediately figured out the reason. At this time, several people present looked towards the Zhong family's side. Undoubtedly, after the Zhou clan had expressed their assistance to Kang Chon, the Zhong clan over there finally couldn't sit still, and Zhong Tianhao's face was grim as he brought the grey-clothed old man and Zhong Qixian over. "He, the four great families in this Demon Yuan City so simple are that Shentapeng and Overlord battle has suffered a heavy blow, knowing that they are no longer able to compete for the water spirit fruit. So they simply befriended Overlord. This move is really brilliant, regardless of the outcome of this time. They have already obtained Overlord's friendship. Even if they lose the water spirit fruit, they have no loss. But instead, the Shenta family has obtained the Overlord as a helping hand. What an old fox." The grey-clothed old man laughed grimly. Zhong Qixian on the side also laughed coldly. After all, an old fox is an old fox. But that little fox of the Zhou family is also not simple. This move to retreat as a way to advance. Not only did it befriend the Overlord, it's not unlikely that the Overlord will give him a water spirit fruit later on. All right, don't talk about it. It's better to think about what to do later. Can we really only stand by and see the water spirit fruit being obtained by that kid? Zhong Tianhao, who was walking in front, couldn't listen anymore and said with a sullen face, "What else can we do? Do you want to make enemies of the three major forces of Demon Yuan City? Or do you want to erect Overlord, a future supreme powerhouse? According to the talent this son has shown so far, it's a certainty that he will worship the Heavenly Tao sect. And there's even a high possibility that he will become a true disciple of the Heavenly Tao sect. I'm afraid that at that time, the entire cultivation world of the Great Tang will be shaken because of a single word from him. So can you, the Zhong family, afford to mess with him? The grey-clothed old man laughed coldly. Zhong Kixan on the side was silent. They indeed couldn't afford to mess with it. Not only Kang Chuan, but also the Shenta family, Yun family, and Zhou family, the three major forces. They didn't dare to offend them at the same time. Zhong Tianhao grimaced. A trace of envy and jealousy flashed in the bottom of his eyes. And in the end, he unwillingly piled on a face full of hypocritical smiles and walked towards Kang Chuan. The name of the Overlord, my little brother equally honors. I think it would be better if we do this. These 7 water spirit fruits are completely handed over to the Overlord to deal with the full support of our Zhong family. What do you all think? Zhong Tianhao hid the grudge he held in his heart, piling on the smile and cupping his fists. Nima. The surrounding crowd rolled their eyes at the words. What else could they do when your brat had said so? The arm was always twisted, but not the thigh. The 4 major forces of Demon Yuan City were all on Kang Chuan's side. The other scattered cultivators and small forces, even if they were given a few guts, they wouldn't dare to say a word of disapproval at this time. Listening to Zhong Tianhao's words, the distant crowd couldn't help but greet their Zhong family's ancestors once again. Now that the 4 great clans of Demon Yuan City had chosen to stand on Kang Chuan's side, what else could they, the small forces and the scattered cultivators, say? They could only watch from the side with dry eyes. Even if they were no longer willing, they could only clench their teeth in secret. After all, this cultivation world was still about whoever had the biggest fist was the boss. In that case, let's wait for the water spirit fruit to ripen. Zhou Yunji smiled faintly as he smiled, for the Zhong family's choice. He had expected it. After all, the situation in front of him was plainly obvious. Kang Chuan had already taken the initiative completely. Zhou Yunji looked at Kang Chuan, who had a bland face in front of him. His heart couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Although this group of young supreme beings were currently not strong enough to contend with the older generation, their talent was enough to make everyone not dare to offend them. To say that he didn't feel envious and jealous in his heart, it was impossible. But for the sake of the Zhou family's future rise, he still knew what to do. There is still half an hour before the water spirit fruit will be ripe. Rumor has it that there are some powerful 1,000-year-old crocodiles in the Being Pool. Later on, you all can't just pay lip service and contribute to the work. Shenta Peng laughed coldly. Originally it was their Shenta family that wanted to befriend Kang Chuan, but now the Zhou family and Zhong family were also involved. He didn't care about the Zhong family. He could see that the Zhong family and Kang Chuan weren't on the same page. And thinking about the fact that Kang Chuan had come out of the Yun family's sister's carriage, he already had some thoughts in his mind. On the contrary, it was this Zhou Yunji that worried him. This little fox was as shrewd as a ghost. In the space of 2 sentences, he had brought them and Kang Chuan closer. He had to say that he was a sociable little fox. Elder Shentu is joking. My Zhou family will fully support later. Zhou Yunji laughed lightly, not caring at all about Shenta Peng's mockery. He simply took advantage of this time to ask Kang Chuan on the side for some cultivation advice. They were both young people. It was much more convenient to pull relationships. Shenta Peng saw gnashing teeth, but he could not pull that old face. Also went over to ask for advice. The Zhong family and the Kangshan family had no relationship with Kangshan. Making that decision was completely forced by the situation, and they stayed on the sidelines and watched coldly after making their stance. The Yun family's crowd also gathered over at this moment, waiting for the water spirit fruit to ripen. The Yun family sisters and Uncle Ma both had strange expressions on their faces. The change in the situation in the arena was really beyond their expectations. Kang Tian had only taught a lesson to Shen Tefeng, and then he completely controlled the situation in the arena. And now he had even easily gained control of the water spirit fruit. This had to surprise them, but they also knew that it was all because the Overlord's name was too loud. Big brother Kang Tian, so you're the Overlord. No wonder you didn't tell us your name. This is called a real person who doesn't keep his name, right? Yun Shuiru skimmed her lips and said in a delicate voice to Kang Tian,